Hola a todos y bienvenidos. I'm Andrew Barr and welcome to Real Fast Spanish. In this video, we're going to cover some of the most important Spanish verbs for beginners. Specifically, we're going to look at 12 essential Spanish verbs that you need to know in order to have a basic conversation. Now, if you just started learning Spanish and you need to improve your basic conversational skills, then keep watching. Vamos. Now, before we jump into the verbs, we need to quickly talk about why verbs are important and how to learn them. Verbs are the backbone of any language. They are words that express action or a state of being. Without verbs, it would be impossible to communicate effectively or express our thoughts and desires. Now, the major difference between English verbs and Spanish verbs is that there are more conjugations in Spanish. For example, notice the contrast between the English verb to speak and the Spanish equivalent, hablar. So in English, we have I speak, you speak, he or she speaks, we speak, they speak. You can see in English that we only have two conjugations, speak and speaks. Whereas in Spanish, we have yo hablo, tú hablas, él, ella habla, nosotros hablamos, ellos, ellas hablan. And then, of course, if you're learning the Spanish of Spain or the Spanish of Argentina, you'll have additional conjugations in the form of vos and vosotros as well. Now, the reason I've put brackets around the pronouns is that in Spanish, we can and often do drop them. We can simply say hablo, hablas, habla, hablamos, hablan. Now, for many students, learning the additional verb conjugations of Spanish can be intimidating, but having worked with many Spanish students over the years and seeing their knowledge grow, I'm confident you can do it too. That said, there are a few techniques you can use to make the process easier. And the first technique I recommend is that you start with the most important conjugations first and learn how to communicate with them well. It's much better to know how to use a few verb conjugations functionally in a conversation than it is to memorize pages and pages of verb conjugations and not know how to put them together in a sentence, right? Which I have seen a few students do over the years. So for the rest of the video, we're only going to focus on the I form and the you form of each verb because they're the most common and most useful in a conversation. So these are sentences like, when are you arriving? I'm arriving soon. Where do you live? I live here. Where are you going? I'm going to visit my friends. Now, once you can speak functionally like this in Spanish, it is a very simple step to add the other verb conjugations like when is she arriving, when are we arriving, when are they arriving, etc. Okay, so with that out of the way, let's jump into the verbs. Now, the first verb on the list, we've already seen the conjugations for, so we'll start with hablar, to speak. Now, a useful question you might need for a trip on a Spanish-speaking country, do you speak English? ¿Hablas inglés? I only speak a little Spanish. Solo hablo un poco de español. Do you speak other languages? ¿Hablas otros idiomas? Now, the next verb on the list is saber, which means to know. Now, if someone asks you a question and you don't know the answer, you can say, I don't know. No lo sé. Now, in this example, the lo means it. So when we say I don't know in Spanish, we need to say literally, I don't know it. Do you know what to do? ¿Sabes qué hacer? Do you know when you are arriving? ¿Sabes cuándo llegas? Now, the next verb is pensar, which means to think. Now, a great question you might want to ask someone is, do you think it's a good idea? ¿Piensas que es una buena idea? I think I'm available tomorrow. Pienso que estoy disponible mañana. I don't think so. Pienso que no. The next verb on the list is decir, which means to say. Now, imagine a situation where someone asks your opinion, but you don't want to say anything negative. You could say, I'm not saying anything. No digo nada. Then if someone asks you something and you don't agree, you can almost ask in protest, hey, what are you saying? ¿Qué dices? Then in contrast, if you genuinely don't understand someone, you can say, I don't understand what you are saying. No entiendo lo que dices. Now for the next verb, we have hacer, which means to do and to make. Now similar to the situation with the last verb, if someone is doing something strange, you could ask in protest, hey, what are you doing? ¿Qué haces? Another example, I make dinner for my family every day. Hago la cena para mi familia todos los días. What do you do in your spare time? ¿Qué haces en tu tiempo libre? Now, the next verb on the list is an irregular verb. This means the conjugations don't follow the usual patterns. Now, the verb is ir, which means to go. And the first conjugations are I go, voy, you go, vas. So, for example, where are you going? ¿A dónde vas? Now, it's important to keep in mind that we have the word a dónde here, which is a combination of a and donde. It just means we're asking literally, To where are you going? And in response, you would say, I'm going to my friend's house to watch a movie. Voy a casa de mi amigo a ver una película. At what time are you going to the doctor? ¿A qué hora vas al médico? And this would literally be in English, at what time are you going to the doctor? And next we have the verb ver, which means to see. And we just saw an example about watching movies, so let's see a few different examples. Now, I remember several years ago, we got blinded by the sun, and a Spanish friend of mine said, I don't see anything. No veo nada. What do you see? ¿Qué ves? You look beautiful, or you look handsome. Te ves muy guapa. Te ves muy guapo. Now here we have an additional te. Now this is there because we are literally saying you see yourself. But of course we don't say that in English. It sounds a little bit strange. So the best translation, te ves muy guapa, you see yourself, beautiful, is you look beautiful. That's just how we would say it in English. Then we have the verb dar, which means to give. So for example, I give money to the church every Sunday. Doy dinero a la iglesia cada domingo. If you give me 10 minutes, I can finish my work. Si me das 10 minutos, puedo terminar mi trabajo. Now, one thing that's worth knowing is that Spanish can use the present tense where we would often use the future in English. For example, when someone asks you, hey, how can I get in contact with you? In English, we'll say, I'll give you my number. I will give you my number, even though it's happening right now. In Spanish, we say, I give you my number because it's like I'm giving you my number right now. Te doy mi número de móvil. The next verb on the list is llegar, which means to arrive. Now, similar to the last example with te doy, we often say I arrive as opposed to I'm arriving. So if someone asks you, hey, when are you getting here? You can say I'm arriving soon. Llego pronto. Now, we can also use llegar for when we're running late. So we could say I'm running late. Llego tarde. Now, another example, what time are you arriving at the airport? ¿A qué hora llegas al aeropuerto? Again, here literally, at what time are you arriving? ¿A qué hora? Next, we have the verb pasar. Now, we can use the verb pasar for physically passing something. For example, I pass by the park on my way to work. Paso por el parque de camino al trabajo. And de camino just means on my way. So for example, estoy de camino, I'm on my way. Now we can also use the verb pasar to talk about spending time, like passing time. So for example, I spend too much time on social media. Paso demasiado tiempo en redes sociales. And you don't spend enough time outdoors. No pasas suficiente tiempo al aire libre. Next, we have the verb vivir, which means to live. So a simple and very common question, where do you live? ¿Dónde vives? I live in the United States. Vivo en los Estados Unidos. I live with my wife and 2 children. Vivo con mi esposa y mis 2 hijos. Now, the last verb on the list for this video is intentar, which means to try, as in to try to do something. For example, like trying to complete a challenge. We need a different verb if we're going to try food, for example, in which case we would need the verb probar. So for intentar, we have, as an example, I'm trying to learn Spanish. Intento aprender español. I'm trying to be more organized in my life. Intento ser más organizado en mi vida. Now, just like English, we can ask a question to make a suggestion to someone. For example, why don't you try to learn a new skill? ¿Por qué no intentas aprender una nueva habilidad? Okay, so now that you've seen these 12 verbs, the next step is to practice, practice, practice. Practicar, practicar, practicar. Take each of the verbs you've seen on this list and form your own sentences. Try to get as comfortable as you can with the I form and the you form. Hablo, hablas. Voy, vas. Hago, haces. Digo, dices. Vivo, vives. Now, once you know these verb conjugations and you feel comfortable using them in a sentence, it'll be a simple step to add in those other verb conjugations. Okay, if you enjoyed this lesson, then give it a thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed, then please subscribe. Of course, as always, if you have any questions, then please leave in the comments section below. And if you want more tips for improving your Spanish, we have a free weekly newsletter called Español de la Semana. To sign up for our weekly newsletter, I'll leave a link below in the description. Okay, thanks so much for watching. Gracias por ver. And until next time, speak better, habla mejor, and understand more. Entiende más.